Special guest James Rowland is here with us from the website Guardians, and we're talking about cybersecurity. We're going to be talking about 8 simple ways to protect your WordPress website. So a lot of us aren't very good at cybersecurity, or maybe it's the last thing that we think about. But I think if we can make it simple enough, we can all do a little something. So for those of you who have a WordPress website, this will be great and informative for you. And if you don't, and you're really looking to invest in one, you might get some tips here. Or if you've got a different platform, I'm sure there'll be things that carry over that we should all be thinking about when it comes to cybersecurity. So thanks so much, James, for joining us here today on Digital Boost.
Yeah, thank you, Anamari.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Now, just a reminder for those of you tuning in on social media, you can communicate with James by using the comment section, the chat function, whatever it is there where you can kind of drop your comments in, and I'll pull them through so we can get your questions answered. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can use the chat function or the Q&A function throughout the session. Thanks. So I'll let you get to it, James. I'm going to open up those chats and here we go.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. James from the website Guardians here, just to give you 8 simple ways to protect your WordPress website. What I'm going to cover today, just a little bit about who the website Guardians are, description about why you need to protect your website. Then I'm going to cover those 8 things on how to protect your website, and finish up with a few resources. The great thing about the tips I'm going to give you, it's all things you can do yourself. And it's something that I'll obviously encourage everyone to do. So the website Guardians, what we do is we do security and maintenance for WordPress websites. WordPress is a fantastic platform, and these days every business needs a website, and it's just important to keep that website up and running. So we provide a service to do that, but also provide a lot of guidance and education on how people can do that themselves. So why do you need to protect your website? So we talk to a lot of small business owners who go, I don't need to protect my website. No one's going to try and hack me. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. We all see these sort of headlines in the newspaper, big, scary headlines about big organizations getting hacked. So the Institute of Directors there, Kathmandu, Bunnings, not Bunnings itself, but one of the third-party services that it uses. Big one, of course, last year with the Waikato DHB getting hacked. And we see these headlines and we go, these are all big businesses. The hackers are all after money. They're never going to target me. Now, in some of these hacks, that is the case. The hackers want money, or they just want to cause disruption. But there are a whole bunch of reasons why hackers will attack your website. And the important message I want to get across is they don't just target big firms. Now, this doesn't just apply to website security. It applies to all cybersecurity. So I encourage you to really make sure you do a bit of training, learn about cybersecurity, because it's important for every single business. There are multiple reasons why hackers attack. The kind of obvious one that people think about is trying to collect personal information. So whether this is names and email addresses, or dates of births, or credit card numbers, and that's with some of these business attacks, that's what people are trying to do. They're trying to collect the personal information that they can then use to either commit identity fraud or try and attack other websites. Another reason is malware hosting. So this is where they put some software on your website. So when someone visits your website, they get malware downloaded to their computer. Now, malware is not good. It can do all sorts of nasty things to people's computers. Again, stealing credentials is a big one, trying to steal banking credentials. Or they could be using that malware to just sit on a person's computer or sit on your website, and in the future, they will use your website to launch an attack against another website in what's called a distributed denial of service attack. The third reason is something called ransomware. So this is where they literally hold your data ransom. So they will install some software on your website. It locks everything down. The only way to unlock it is to pay the hackers, usually in cryptocurrency. It's obviously going to be an expensive exercise, and your website's going to be down until you pay for it. Defacement is the fourth one I've got listed there, and that's just where maybe they're having a bit of fun. They just take down your homepage, replace it with a different picture. Of course, the picture might not be something that you want. It could be a competitor. It could be other things like porn or other images that you don't want associated with your business. Redirects is another one. And again, this is semi-related to the porn, where they will redirect your website to a porn website or a dodgy Tinder clone or their own website. Or the other case I've seen is they'll redirect to a website that looks like yours. And this is a way where they're trying to get your username and password. So you type in your URL, it redirects you to a domain that looks like yours with a login form. You type it in, and then the hackers have your username and password. They then use that to log into your website. The sixth reason is something called SEO spam. And this is where they either target high traffic pages on your website, or they will load up your website with thousands and thousands and thousands of blog posts. And these all link to their own website. Now, the reason they're doing this is they're trying to lift their website up the Google rankings. Now, Google is pretty good at cutting down on this behavior, but it's an ever-evolving landscape. The hackers are always trying new things. And the last thing you want is your website filled with thousands of rubbish blog posts pointing off to some random site that you know absolutely nothing about. Now, these aren't the only reasons. These are just some of the main reasons. But an important thing to remember is these attacks are all automated. It's not someone sitting in a room somewhere going, oh, there's this hairdresser on Queen Street, I'm going to target them. What they're doing is they've got software. It just goes through every single website on the internet. It probes it. It looks for information about the website, like, is it made, was it built on WordPress? Was it built on Wix? What platform it was built on. Once they know it was built on WordPress, they start probing to see if it's got any vulnerable software on there. And then if they find the software, they can then do the attack. But like I said, this is all automated. There's thousands of computers all around the world doing this constantly. So it's a constant game. But they're not targeting you specifically. It's all automated, and this is why you need to be concerned about it, because they're not targeting you. They're just targeting everyone. If the worst thing happens and you do get hacked, now there are going to be some costs involved. Money is the obvious one. So if your website is down, it's going to cost you lost revenue. If you are the victim of a ransomware attack, you may have to pay money to unlock your website. If you need to get someone in to clean it up, then you're going to have to obviously pay money for them. There's also a huge amount of lost time in terms of, again, getting everything fixed. Your website's going to be down. It's not going to be working for your business. And your website is such a critical part of your business these days. The third reason I've got there is your SEO rankings can take a hit. If your website's got malware on it and Google works that out, then when people click on your link from the Google search result, they will get a warning that says this website contains malware. Or if you're a victim of one of those SEO spam attacks, what can happen is when people search the terms that you usually rank well for, you're going to start dropping down those rankings. All of these obviously a big cost to your business, but the biggest cost is the loss of reputation. Can you imagine going to a business's website and it gets flagged as malware, or it's full of spam, or it downloads something dodgy to your computer? You'll probably never do business with that company again. And the same is true of your website. The loss of reputation is almost incalculable. So I really do implore everyone, and obviously it's the point of this presentation, to give you some tips on how to start protecting yourself, but please take cybersecurity really seriously, not just with your website, but with the rest of your IT infrastructure. Now, a question we get asked a lot is WordPress secure? So obviously I've talked about all these different hacks that people can do, and we know that they happen. Websites are getting hacked all the time. Is WordPress secure? And the answer is very simple. Yes, with a little asterisk. What I like to compare this to is your car. Your car is perfectly safe as long as you maintain it well, you drive it properly, and that you generally don't do anything silly. WordPress is the same. WordPress, the core of WordPress is very secure. There's thousands of developers who work on it. It's a very mature platform. It's very secure. Where things start to become a bit insecure is when you start extending the functionality with your plugins and your themes. If you are not using plugins and themes from reliable sources, if your hosting is not up to scratch, all these add-ons are where things can get potentially insecure. But by default, WordPress is very secure. And most of the time, the plugins and themes and things that you add are also secure, again, as long as you're getting them from reputable places. So now I guess we get into the actionable part of the presentation. So I'm just going to run through 8 tips on how you can secure your WordPress website. Again, these are all things that you can do yourself. And I've got a resources link at the end, so you don't need to write down all the plugins that I recommend. There's a link at the end that you can go to where they're all listed, so that you can check to see if they're installed on your website, or if you or you can go and install them yourselves. So the first rule, and this doesn't, the disclaimer. These are all the tips and tricks. They're going to help you improve the security on your website, and they're going to reduce the chance of getting hacked. Unfortunately, we can never guarantee that a website is not going to get hacked. Like I said, security is constantly evolving. It's not a set and forget. You need to constantly be updating it. The hackers are constantly changing their methods. So while these will reduce your chances, unfortunately, I can't guarantee that you won't get hacked, but I am going to provide some tips on what you can do if you get hacked at the end. The first tip, and like I said, started saying before, this doesn't just apply to your website, it applies to absolutely everything that you have a password for. Please use a strong password. This handy table shows just how quickly weak passwords can get hacked. So if you look in the bottom right-hand corner there, if you've got an 18-character password with numbers, uppercase, lowercase, letters, symbols, it's all completely random. To do something called brute force, which is where you just try and guess it, you're looking at 438 trillion years, which is quite a long time. But if you've got, at the other extreme, 6 numbers only, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's going to get cracked almost instantly. Same with the password, going to get cracked almost instantly. Now, you might laugh, but unfortunately, the password, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are some of the most common passwords that people use. So if you are using a weak password like that, please, please, please go and change it. Same with passwords where it's just a word and you might have changed an E to a 3 or an A to the @ sign. Things like that make your password easy to remember. They also can make them quite weak. So please make sure you have strong passwords. And to help with that, use something called a password manager. So I've just listed a couple here, 1Password and LastPass, which are 2 of the most common ones. There are others. And what these will do is they will generate strong passwords for you, and they will store them securely. And the advantage of this is that when you go to your website, you don't have to remember that 50-character random string. 1Password's remembered it for you. It can fill it in your browser, and you can log in. These tools just help you have unique, secure passwords for absolutely everything you use. And not only that, they actually make your life easier, because you just have to remember the 1Password to get into your vault, rather than having to remember which password did you use on which site. So if you're not using one already, please go and use one. The second tip is to make sure that your website has something called an SSL certificate. So this is where your website is HTTPS, and it's got the little padlock in the corner. Sometimes people think they only need that if they're an e-commerce site and they're collecting personal information. That's not the case anymore. I strongly recommend that everybody uses SSL, even if you don't have a contact form or you've got a very basic contact form. At the very least, your login page to the admin area of your website needs to be secured. But also these days, customers expect it. They sometimes they get a little bit hesitant if they see a website that doesn't have that little padlock in the corner. And also Google likes SSL certificates, and it will give you a slight bump in your Google rankings by using an SSL certificate. Now, you will need to talk to your web host about making sure if you don't have an SSL certificate, talk to your web host. They'll be able to install one for you. Most web hosts these days will do that as a free service using something called Let's Encrypt. The third thing is to update everything. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is you need to make sure you're updating what's called WordPress core. So that's when you, if you log in, you'll see a little thing at the very top of your admin that says upgrade to WordPress 6.0.1. Update your plugins and update your themes. So you can see which plugins need to get updated on the left-hand side of your admin screen. Next to the plugins menu option, there's a little red circle with a number in it, and that's the number of plugins that you need to update. For the themes, you need to go to the appearance section of your admin area and just keep everything up to date. Now, I recommend you do this on at least a monthly cycle, unless there's a security alert for some software that you've got, in which case update it as soon as you can. But the other thing you need to make sure that's being updated, and this is something, again, to talk to your web host about, make sure that the operating system on the server is being updated, that the version of PHP is being updated. I still see sites that are using version 5.6 of PHP, which is now really, really old and hasn't been supported for a long time. So if there's any security issues with it, they're not getting fixed. You need to be on at least PHP 7.4 or ideally PHP 8. The other software that should always be upgraded as well is your version of MySQL. So again, that is unfortunately something you need to talk to your host with. Sometimes you can do this from your control panel. If you're using cPanel, for example, there's options in there to change the PHP version. But I would always suggest sending a support request to your web host just to make sure that all the versions are being kept up to date. This here is a list of from a place called PHP Stack, which is one of the many websites that you can go to see a list of security vulnerabilities and plugins and themes. So you can see here, even in just the past 4 days, there's been a reasonable number. Now, most of the time, these won't affect you, but I just wanted to highlight just how often these security vulnerabilities are coming up, and which is why it's so important that you're making sure that your software gets updated. Because what will happen is you'll install a version of a plugin, and it'll all be fine. And then at some point, someone may discover a security vulnerability. There is a disclosure process that people go through where they let the plugin make a no first, give them a chance to update the plugin first. And then once an updated version of the plugin is available, then they release the fact that there's a security vulnerability. So while when you install it, it might be fine, someone may have found a vulnerability. So by updating, you just patch that vulnerability and ensure that your website remains safe. The fourth tip is to hide your WordPress login screen. So like I said before, all these attacks are automated. So what they'll do is if they work out you've got a WordPress site, they'll go to yourdomain.co.nz/wp-admin. And most of the time, that will bring up the login form to the admin area of your website. So I highly recommend that you hide that, give it a different name. Now, this is not the only way that people can log into their website. WordPress has an API. They may also trying to get in via the API. But as a first step, this is a good security measure. And there's a good plugin to do this called WPS Hide Login. It's really common. It's really popular. It works really well. It's super simple. And it's free. It's available from the WordPress repository. So in the back end of your WordPress website, just go to plugins, add new, and do a search for it, and you'll be able to install it. The only caveat is make sure you remember that the new URL of your login page so that you can log in the future. Number 5 is to use a security plugin. Now, there are lots of security plugins out there. I've got 3 of the common ones that I recommend listed here. A security plugin is just going to add extra protection to your website. Now, they all do slightly different things, so you do need to do a little bit of research. I tend to use Mailcare and iThemes together. What so what these security plugins will do is they will put what's called a firewall on your website, so that will automatically protect your website against certain IPs that we know about. So if we know that an IP address is full of Russian bots, it'll block that IP from being able to access your website. If someone tries to log in lots of times to your website and fails because they're trying to brute force the password, it's automatically going to block them. It'll also add.
We've got a question, James. I don't know. I don't want to go too far and then have the question be a little bit disjointed just because of the nature of it. Is that all right?
That's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. So it says, Carl's asked, you mentioned only using trusted plugins. How do you know which ones are good or dodgy?
Yeah, good question. Research is the main way to do it. So there are some big plugin companies. So if you're using something like Elementor or Divi, as a page builder, they have lots of installs and lots of reviews as well. So I guess similar to when you're looking up anything on the internet, reviews are key. The WordPress.org repository has reviews, and it also shows you the number of installs. So if something's been installed 100,000 times, it's got a 5-star rating, that's probably fairly reputable. If you do a Google search and something comes up offering a theme really cheap, or a plugin really cheap, or something called a nulled theme, so N-U-L-L-E-D, that is definitely not reliable, and stay well away from those. Yeah, so that's probably the main ones. Do some research, look at the reviews. There's also websites like WP Mayor, as in the mayor of a city, WPMAYOR.com, as well as some from some of the hosting companies, and they have recommendations, and they'll be only recommending reliable ones. So I hope that helps. So back
and there's just a comment said, yes, too many installs of security in websites. Yeah, and then WordPress is good or not good, but protect the security system, question mark.
Yeah, so WordPress is good as a general rule. Like I said, WordPress core itself is very secure. Where some of the insecurities start to creep in is through these plugins and themes, which is why ensuring you have the reputable ones is highly recommended. I was going to say the WordPress.org repository, which is when you go plugins, add new, and you can do a search, and that's pretty reliable. So that is a good source as well. Yeah, in terms of, I'm just trying to think if there's any other ones. There are some large marketplaces as well, like Envato and Code Canyon. Again, they're quite reliable. They've got a good support network around them. So they're the sorts of places I would start to look. Any more questions at this stage?
No, I think we're good. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, please keep asking questions. Yeah, happy to stop and answer them before we get too far down the track. So we were talking about these security plugins and the extra levels of protection they offer. So there's the blocking of IP addresses. There's the blocking of brute force logins. They'll also do some things like disabling the execution of PHP in certain places on your website, which will help tighten up security. They also scan your website for vulnerable plugins. So this is a big one where they will email you and say, oh, you've got plugin XYZ. There's been a vulnerability that's been announced in that plugin. Please go update it. And they'll usually give you details of the vulnerability so you can have a little bit of a look. And there are a few other settings. It might sound complicated, but they are very easy to use. And basically one of these like no-brainer things to get on your website, they just give you such a security boost. Again, like I said earlier, unfortunately, we can never guarantee that you won't get hacked, but these sorts of plugins will definitely help. Number 6 is disable debug logging. So this one's a little bit more technical. WordPress has a debugging feature that helps when people are building websites or developing new plugins and themes, just helps you work out what's going on or what might be causing a particular error. Now, sometimes this can get left on accidentally, especially if you had a problem on your website and maybe you jumped in to have a look at it, or your developer jumped in to have a look at it, and they might have turned on debug logging while they were trying to solve the problem, and then potentially forgotten to turn it off. Now, there are two ways to tell if this is left on. One is you'll get sort of random messages on your screen that might say like notice or warning or error. Or if you go to this URL, so your domain.co.nz/wp-content/debug.log. Now, if you do that and there's a file, so you're probably prompted to download it, or your browser will show a whole bunch of text. That means that logging is probably still on and you need to turn it off. Now, it might look complicated to turn off when I say start editing PHP files. It's not too scary. You can do this through the control panel. Usually, if you're using cPanel, there's a file manager. You can just go and edit your WP config file and just look for that line WP_debug_log, and it will say true, and just change it to false. So that will turn that off. You also need to delete that debug.log file, because it can just reveal a bit of information to anyone trying to attack your website.
We just have another question here. I think you've answered the other questions that just says, do the security plugins slow the website speed down?
Yes, good question. So this is one that does come up. Any plugin that you add to your website is going to potentially slow it down. And there is a little bit of a trade-off, obviously. So they will slow them down a little bit. It's not likely to be noticeable. What I would say is if you're worried about performance, so I had a couple listed there. I'll just go back quickly. WordFence and Malcare, what they both do is do some scans of your website. The free version of WordFence will do that on your server. So that's a little bit intense, resource intensive. So that might slow down your website a bit more. Whereas Malcare take a copy of your website and upload it to their servers. So there's less of an impact on yours. So if you're worried about performance, then maybe look at Malcare over WordFence. But like I said, the performance hit is not really going to be noticeable. One way you can test it is do a page speed test on your website, then install the plugin and do another.
I've dropped that link into the chat actually, James. So if you're having a look and if you click open the chat, you'll see that pagespeed.web.dev / just click on that link and it'll take you out and you can have a look at the speed of your website and it'll show you areas that you can improve as well. I think also Checkable will do some things like that on Digital Boost.
Yes, yep. Yeah, Checkable uses a lot of that same page speed results. So if you haven't checked out already, definitely check out the Checkable tool inside Digital Boost. Number 7 here is to delete unused plugins and themes and users. So it's just like everything, just keeping everything a little bit tidy. The more tight things are, the less vectors there are for hackers to get in. Deleting unused plugins and users is pretty simple. If you just go to the plugin screen of your admin area, there's a delete button on any unactivated plugins. So you can tell that they're not active because they've got that white background in the table. So you can just go ahead and delete them. You're obviously not using them. If they're there, you've still got to keep them updated and that kind of stuff. So just if you're not using them, just delete them. Same with your themes. If you go under your appearances tab, chances are you'll have a few themes. You might have a few of the default themes like 2020 and 2021 and 2022. You can safely remove those if you're not using them. The same with users. If you've got users on your website that no longer need access, please remove them. So, and a good example of where this can happen is you've got your website and maybe you get someone in to do some marketing. So you need to give them access to your website, and maybe you have a copywriter and you get them to do some blog posts and they need access to your website. And then things change and then you get a different company or the person who has access moves on, or you have an employee who moves on. I often see websites where all of those accounts are still there and they all have administrator access. So please remove accounts as soon as they're no longer needed. If you're not sure if someone is going to need access in the future, what you can do is change their role from administrator to subscriber. You can do that by clicking on that edit button underneath their username. And if you scroll down, there's a field there that says their role. So if you drop it down to a subscriber, it just means that when they do log in, they won't have access to things like the plugins and the themes and some of the other settings on the website. And it just keeps everything a bit more secure, especially if they're not logging in, they won't be updating their password. So there's a chance that the password will become insecure over time because it's part of a different hack. So with the passwords, unfortunately, some people do reuse passwords. Like I said in step one, please don't do that. Please use a password manager. But just in case someone on your website has reused a password, and removing them as a user or reducing their privileges will help provide an extra level of protection. So the last step, or the last tip, I guess, is to have a schedule. So like I said, this security it's an ongoing thing. It's not one and done. So have a schedule on when you're going to go and do these updates. Put the time in your calendar. Like I said, I suggest doing the updates monthly. If you install iThemes or Malcare or WordFence, they will also alert you if there's a security vulnerability. Check the security vulnerability as soon as you can, because if it's a serious one, you'll need to update the website. So have a schedule, and also include things on the schedule like checking for users that you don't expect or plugins that you didn't install, just in case someone has got in and they're doing something. Also checking if you've suddenly got heaps of blog posts, and also just visiting your website to make sure everything looks okay. Now, if anyone wants a more detailed schedule on sort of weekly, monthly, quarterly tasks, I'll show my email address at the end of this, and you feel free to email me and I can send you a PDF with just the list of tasks and how often you should be doing them. So the final, I guess it's a bonus, number 9 is have offsite backups. Now this relates more to fixing a hack if you do get hacked. So many web hosts will offer backups. Make sure you check to find out what that means and if you can restore from backup yourself. So some web hosts will do backups, but you can't access the backups. So if you need to restore your website, you'll need to contact their support and there'll be a bit of a delay. Other hosting companies within the control panel, you can do a restore by yourself. But what I do recommend is even the ones you can restore yourself, that you put in a backup plugin that copies the backup to a different server. So if something does happen to the server, you have a copy of your website that you can just restore somewhere else. So there's a couple of ones I recommend there, Updraft Plus and Backup Buddy. There are lots of backup plugins, so it is a little bit of a case of experimenting and finding one that you like. But do make sure that you can back up to a third-party server. So by that, I mean your OneDrive or your Google Drive or Dropbox, or even FTP to a different server. That way, if something happens to the server, you have a copy, and you, like I said, you can restore that somewhere else. There's nothing worse than having all of the backups on the server and then the server going down. Another thing that's really important with backups, and again, this doesn't just apply to website backups, but all the backups in your business, please test them and make sure that you can restore them. So if you do need to use them, you know that it will work and you know the process that's involved. So in summary, everyone needs to take cybersecurity seriously. The hackers, it's all automated. They're not just attacking the big businesses, but they're attacking thousands and thousands of small businesses too. And while that sounds scary, there are, if you follow those 8 things that I told you, that will provide you a good level of protection. Like I said, unfortunately, we can never guarantee that no one's going to get hacked, but there's some steps that you can take to help keep yourself a little bit protected. So the ones that I went through just quickly: have strong passwords. Please use a password manager. Make sure you've got an SSL certificate on your website. Keep everything updated. So that's your WordPress core, your themes, your plugins, as well as the PHP, the operating system on the server, and the version of MySQL, which you may need to talk to your web host about. Hide the WordPress login. Use a security plugin. Ensure that the debug logging is disabled. Delete any unused plugins and users. Have a schedule to do some checks to keep everything updated and make sure nothing looks amiss, and have offsite backups. So we've already had a couple of really good questions. Are there any other questions?
Not currently. We've got some really great engagement here today on this session, so I'm really happy with that. So thanks everybody so much for joining us. I'm just going to have a quick look across the channels and make sure we haven't missed any questions coming through, as people were probably absorbing and then wanting to have a think before getting in. So good, just some feedback there. Yes, I got it for this. So this is fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us here today on Digital Boost, and you've got your information there. If you're on social media, you'll be able to rewatch this kind of right away after it finishes and it goes through its process. But if you've joined us here today on Zoom, you'll receive the link to this session in a thank you for attending email. So you'll be able to kind of fast forward through some areas that you might want to rewatch and work on your website. I hope you guys have got some really great value. What I loved about this session is it was just so easy to follow. So I really appreciate James making something that can be quite complex easy enough for us all to be able to understand and follow along. I'll just double check. Just a thanks, James, from Dean, and mentioned removing users. How does that apply to e-commerce?
Right. So e-commerce, it's a little bit of a different scenario, because if you're talking about customers, you won't want to remove them because you don't know when they're going to return. So someone might buy something from you, and then of course they might buy something in a couple of years' time. The main users that we're concerned about, when I say remove users, is ones who have higher privileges on the website, so they can do more things in the back end. So that's your administrators and editors, shop managers. So if you're using WooCommerce, there's a role called shop manager. If you're using Yoast SEO, there's a SEO manager role as well. So those are the users that you want to monitor and remove, or like I said, you can reduce their privileges down to customer or subscriber. The customers and subscribers, you can leave those because they're your clients or potential clients, so they can stay there. It's just the ones who, I guess, have access to the admin area and can make changes to your website are the ones you need to be careful about.
Yeah, just a whole bunch of thank yous coming through. I'm just replying back in the chat. The chat has been fired up today. So thanks so much for joining us here today and contributing. You're very welcome. Looking forward to some good sessions this week. Look, if you use Google, we're going to be doing a session with a Google certified partner or trainer on Thursday. That's going to be a workshop session. We're going to use lots of different Google tools, and we'll even talk about Google Ads in that session. So don't miss out. That's on Thursday. You just need a Google account, really, if you want to join in. It's not a big deal. Just come along and you'll get some great insight there. This has been a fabulous session, and I'm so glad you had the time to do this for us, because I know there was a while there you know your family was unwell with COVID, but it was a bit back and forth. I thought, oh goodness me, but we're so glad you guys have pulled through, and looking forward to working with you in the future. Thanks so much again, James. Appreciate your times.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been great. I hope everyone's found it useful. And if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to book a call, send an email, give me a phone call. Happy to discuss any further questions you've got or provide any advice. Because it's just so important that you focus on your website security. So please don't hesitate to reach out and get in touch.
Yeah. Have a good one day, everyone. Ka kite, and we'll see you. Hopefully I'll see you on Thursday. So see you. Have a great day.
Excellent.